Undercover CEO Millionaire found a new waitress sleeping in the restaurant booth after work. What he did next shocked everyone. "I told you table 4. Ordered the grilled salmon, not the roasted chicken. This is the 3rd time tonight." Sandra, the manager's voice, sliced through the buzz of the restaurant like a blade. Sandra Carter stood frozen, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. Her blonde hair, tied back hastily, had loosened in wisps that framed her pale face. She didn't defend herself. She didn't argue. She simply nodded once and whispered, "I'm sorry." Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the plate, the movement almost imperceptible to the bustling wait staff around her, but he noticed. "Rough night?" Ethan Miles asked, carrying a tray of empty glasses past her. His tone was light, almost too casual. Sandra offered a polite, distant smile, one of those reflexive ones people wear when they've stopped expecting kindness to last. "Just clumsy, I guess." The manager threw a towel down onto the counter and stormed toward the kitchen, still muttering under his breath. Sandra turned back to the dining room without another word. Ethan, still wearing the name tag Eric, was new. At least that was the assumption. No one in the restaurant knew he was the founder and CEO of Miles and Flavors, a chain of successful restaurants across the state. He had come undercover to observe, to reconnect with the people who made the business run at the ground level. But what he had not expected was her. Sandra moved like someone carrying invisible weight. Shoulders slightly curved, steps careful, but efficient, voice soft yet firm when speaking to customers. She didn't stand out. That was what made her stand out. By midnight, the last table had been cleared. The lights dimmed. The clatter of plates and silverware had faded. Most of the staff had already clocked out and trickled into the cool night. Ethan returned, stepping back into the quiet space. He had left his wallet in the locker room earlier and came back to retrieve it. The place felt different. Without the noise, more hollow somehow. He passed the booths near the window and stopped. There, curled up in one of the corner seats, was Sandra. She was fast asleep. Her head rested against the vinyl seat back, her apron still tied. Flowers smudged across her sleeve. One hand clutched a faded dish towel, stained, frayed, and folded neatly, as if it held more value than its appearance suggested. For a moment, Ethan simply stared. She looked so small, so exhausted, so alone. He took a step closer and gently bent down. "Sandra," he said softly. She stirred, her lashes fluttering as if trying to open against her will. "5 more minutes. Don't turn off the stove," she murmured, then sank back into sleep. Ethan hesitated. On the table beside her, he noticed a folded piece of paper. He reached for it, careful not to wake her. In careful handwriting, it read, "Recipes for the soul. Dishes to help you forget the pain." Something in him shifted. He had tasted hundreds of recipes, managed chefs across cities, sat through corporate tastings where every dish was flawless but none memorable. Yet this scrap of paper written by a waitress who slept in booths after midnight felt more real than anything he had read in years. He looked back at her. The dim lighting softened her features. She didn't look fragile. She looked tired of pretending to be strong. There was a difference, and he knew it well. Quietly, he slid off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. Her fingers instinctively curled tighter around the towel in her hands. But she didn't stir. He didn't wake her, didn't ask questions, didn't leave a note. He just stood there for another minute, watching her sleep like a soldier fallen after battle. Then, without a sound, he turned and walked away, his expression unreadable except for the weight behind his eyes. Sandra Carter had once believed that food could heal anything. She believed it in the pristine kitchens of Luceron Bleu, whisking sauces under the eyes of French instructors who praised her instinct and palate. She believed it when she and her husband opened a rustic little restaurant called Cart and Flame, their shared dream born from love and late-night planning. At 26, she co-designed the menu, sourced local ingredients, and created dishes that drew weekend crowds. They called her the soul behind the stove. Her husband, charming and business-savvy, handled the front end and seemed to adore her until the night he handed her a stack of routine papers. A license update, he claimed. Trusting him, she signed. 3 weeks later, she was gone. He had taken everything, sold the business, kept the profits, and vanished from her life like she had never existed. She didn't fight, not in court, not in the press. There was nothing left to defend but a wooden box of her mother's knives and the one thing betrayal couldn't take. Her gift, the ability to coax flavor from anything, even pain. Now at 28, she worked nights in a chain restaurant serving microwave pasta. No one knew her past. No one asked. But Ethan noticed. He saw her Monday. Coworkers' torn glove with thread from her purse. Saw her tuck extra bread rolls into foil for the dishwasher who never brought lunch. She did it quietly, without credit or expectation. Once during a chaotic lunch shift, Ethan moved to help a flustered new server, but Sandra was already there adjusting trays, whispering, "Just breathe. Focus." On one table. The panic vanished from the girl's face. Later, Ethan said, "You're always the calm in the chaos." Sandra smiled and shrugged. Sometimes, kindness is all we have left to give. Those words lingered longer than they should have. Ethan Miles was no stranger to loss. Years ago, he stood before 100 guests in a tailored suit, waiting for a bride who never arrived. No calls, no warnings, just a note. "I realized I don't love the man you've become. You love your career more than anyone." After that, he dove into work. Miles and flavors grew. So did his bank account and his walls. He became guarded, strategic, detached. Love was no longer worth the risk. But Sandra unsettled him. Not because she flirted. She didn't. Not because she tried to impress. She avoided attention. She stirred something deeper. Her quiet, unwavering kindness reminded him of who he once was. He began watching her more closely, not like a man noticing beauty, but like someone watching a candle's last flicker and wondering how it's still burning. One evening during staff break, Sandra handed a sandwich to an older janitor starting his shift. "You should eat," she said. The man smiled, a few teeth missing. "You always feed people, don't you?" Sandra just shrugged. "It's what I'm good at." Ethan, sitting nearby, asked, "Do you ever get tired of giving when no one gives back?" She paused, then whispered, "Sometimes. But when you lose everything, the only thing they can't take is your capacity to care." That was when he knew she wasn't broken. She was bruised, battered by betrayal. But something inside her still glowed. That night, as he walked to his car, Ethan glanced back at the restaurant window and saw her wiping down tables. He didn't know her story yet, but he knew he wanted to. It was just past 8 on a rainy Thursday evening when the call came in. Chef Don, the kitchen lead, had gone home sick. Food still needed to be prepped. Orders were piling up. Tensions were rising. The manager, already overwhelmed, barked orders to the assistant cooks, who looked more panicked with each minute. "Someone just get the soup ready," he shouted. "We've got 6 orders waiting." Sandra stood behind the prep counter, drying her hands quietly. No one looked at her. No one asked her to step in. They never did. She hesitated for just a second, then moved. Calmly, without announcement, She tied on an apron, walked into the kitchen, and started pulling ingredients from the fridge. Ethan watched her, arms folded near the back exit. She moved differently from the others. Her hands knew what they wanted. She did not measure, she felt. The kitchen, once chaotic, slowed down as her presence filled it. Not loud or commanding, but assured. "What's she making?" One of the line cooks whispered to another. "No idea," the other murmured. "But it smells real." 15 minutes later, steaming bowls of golden broth with chicken, carrots, and herbs began landing on tables. Customers who had been grumbling now sat in silence, spooning the soup like it was the only thing that mattered. Ethan, curious, walked into the kitchen and lifted the lid of the pot. The aroma hit him like a wave. Garlic, thyme, white wine, butter, and something that shouldn't be possible. He froze. His mind yanked him backward in time. He was 6 years old again, sitting on a stool in his grandmother's tiny country kitchen, watching her stir the pot with one hand and butterbread with the other. It was winter. His parents were fighting in the other room. His grandmother had said, "Eat this, baby. Let the warmth get all the way to your heart." He blinked hard, swallowed. "Sandra," he asked. More of a whisper than a question. She turned around slowly, wiping her hands on a towel. "Where did you learn to make that?" he asked, voice. Sandra looked at him, her expression unreadable. "It's just an old recipe." He stared at her. "It's exactly how my grandmother made it." She gave a faint smile, then replied, "Then your grandmother had good taste." He paused, watching her as she stirred the pot again. "Who taught you?" he asked. "My mother," she said softly, eyes still on the simmering soup. "She made it for my father the last time he came home from the hospital. He was too weak to eat anything else." Ethan felt his chest tighten. They were quiet for a while. The only sound, the gentle bubbling of broth and clinking of ladles. "Do you ever cook just for yourself?" he asked, almost afraid of the answer. Sandra shook her head. "Not anymore. I used to when I believed it mattered." Ethan looked down, then glanced toward the dining area. "Would you eat with me?" he asked. She turned to him, slightly surprised. "I mean just a bowl of soup," he added quickly. "It's too good not to share." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." They sat at a corner booth in the now quiet restaurant. 2 bowls between them, steam rising, rain pattering gently against the windows. Outside, for a while, they didn't speak. Then Ethan asked, "If tomorrow was your last day, what would you cook?" Sandra looked up, her eyes reflecting the golden light. "This," she said simply, "chicken Normandy. It tastes like home, like love, like things that were once whole." He nodded slowly. "I haven't tasted this since I was a boy," he said. "My grandmother used to make it during snowstorms. I thought I forgot what it tasted like." Sandra smiled, not out of pride, but recognition. "Some flavors never really leave us." Ethan stared at his spoon. "I had a meal once. I called it the last real meal of my life. I never talked about it again until now." She looked at him gently. "Maybe some meals are meant to be remembered only when we're ready." Their eyes met. It was not a romantic moment. Not yet. But something passed between them. Understanding, a shared grief, a spark of something tender and painfully real. Not the beginning of love, perhaps, but the end of isolation. The rain came down hard that night. Sheets of silver cascading onto the streets, turning gutters into rivers and sidewalks into mirrors. Ethan had just locked the restaurant's back door when he saw her. Sandra. She sat on the edge of the bus stop bench across the street, drenched, legs tucked under her as if trying to vanish. In her lap rested a worn wooden box, arms wrapped tightly around it. Even from a distance, he knew what it was. Her knives. He ran across the street, rain soaking through his clothes. "Sandra," he called. She didn't look up, just rocked slightly, trying to stay warm without showing weakness. He crouched in front of her. "What are you doing out here?" "They changed the locks," she said softly. "I missed rent again." Ethan glanced at the box. She was shivering, soaked, mascara faintly smudged, less from vanity than from a long day holding herself together. "You can't stay out here." "I'm fine," she said, automatically, though her lips trembled. "No, you're not," he replied gentler. "Come with me just for tonight." She hesitated. "Where?" "I have a friend," he lied. "His place is empty, warm, dry, just for the night." She gave him a skeptical look. "There's a stove," he added. "You can even cook something if you want." That drew the faintest smile. "That's your pitch." "It's not my worst," he said with a soft laugh. She didn't answer right away, just looked down at the box, fingers gripping it like a lifeline. "I don't want pity," she whispered. "You won't get any," he said. "But no one can cook like you when they're shaking from the cold." She looked up at him. Something in his voice, earnest, unpolished, cut through. For the first time in a long while, someone saw her as more than her situation. Not a burden, not a sob story. She nodded once. 10 minutes later, they were inside a modest, cozy apartment. Ethan handed her a towel and pointed to the shower. "Clean towels. Under the sink. I'll make something warm." She disappeared down the hall. Ethan stood in the kitchen, heart racing, not from the cold, but from how easily he'd lied to keep her safe. The place was his, rarely used, from a life he barely recognized. When she returned, wrapped in a borrowed sweatshirt and smelling faintly of lavender, a bowl of steaming egg noodles with soft-boiled eggs and broth waited on the table. "Egg noodles," she said, raising an eyebrow. Ethan shrugged. "It's what I make when the world feels heavier than it should." She smiled, sat, and picked up the chopsticks. They ate quietly. Then he asked, "Have you ever been in love?" She looked at him, then down. "I thought I was, but when it ended, I couldn't tell if I'd loved him or the future I thought we were building." He nodded. "I was supposed to get married once." Her eyes lifted. "She never showed," he said, setting his chopsticks down. "Everything was ready. Venue, guests, suit pressed. I waited 32 minutes. Sandra's face softened. "Did she say why?" She left a note. Said, "I was married to my ambition, not to her." She didn't speak at first, then gently. "Not everyone who leaves is a villain, but some people walk away from the best thing they'll ever know and never realize it." Ethan exhaled slow and quiet. That moment settled between them. Not heavy, just real, like the clink of two glasses acknowledging sorrow, like a scar no longer needing to be hidden. He looked at her. She wasn't just the woman with quiet hands and soft eyes. She was someone who'd been gutted and survived. That night, they didn't talk about cooking or the restaurant. They just sat at a small table, sharing bowls of simple food and the quiet between two hearts that had stopped pretending they weren't tired. It was just past 11 when the last customer walked out, leaving behind only a half-empty glass of soda and a few wrinkled napkins. The night shift at the restaurant had been rough, short-staffed, behind schedule, and full of tension. Everyone looked worn out, moving slower as they scrubbed counters and stacked chairs. Sandra noticed. She saw the dishwasher massaging his wrist, the hostess yawning so wide she nearly dropped her clipboard. The line cook slumped against the cooler. She looked over at Ethan, who was restocking shelves near the back. "Hey," she said softly. He looked up. "Yeah. Do you think we could maybe cook something just for the staff? Just a little something before everyone heads home? He raised an eyebrow. You mean now? She nodded. They're exhausted and honestly, I could use it too. Ethan paused, reading something in her face that was more than fatigue. Then he smiled. Lead the way, chef. 30 minutes later, the kitchen was alive again, but this time with warmth instead of stress. Sandra moved with purpose, pulling ingredients from the walk-in, setting up cutting boards, unwrapping garlic cloves, and slicing fresh herbs. Her hair was pulled up messily, and her sleeves were rolled high. Ethan joined her, tying on an apron without asking. Cop those, she said, pointing to a pile of onions. Yes, chef, she smirked. You're getting better at this. I learned from the best. They worked side by side, chopping, stirring, tasting. The dish was simple. A hearty rice porridge with slow-cooked chicken, scallions, crispy shallots, and soft-boiled eggs. Comfort food, soul food. As the aroma filled the space, tired employees began drifting toward the kitchen, drawn in like moths to light. Are we allowed to eat this? The hostess asked, half laughing. Sandra handed her a bowl. You earned it. The dishwasher took a bite and closed his eyes. Tastes like something my mom used to make. Sandra smiled, but said nothing. Ethan watched her. The way her eyes softened when people smiled. The way her shoulders relaxed in the warmth of shared gratitude. She handed him a bowl last. They leaned against the counter, eating in comfortable silence as soft chatter and laughter filled the air behind them. You know, she said. Eventually, when I was little, my mom used to say food could tell the truth. Ethan turned to her, curious. How so? She looked at him. When you cook with someone, you can't fake it. You can't hide your mood or your heart. It comes out in the food, in the way you stir, the way you season, the way you taste before serving. When people cook together, they can't lie. Ethan stared down at his bowl, taking in her words. Then he said quietly, So what truth? Are we cooking tonight? Sandra smiled. The kind of smile that crept up from somewhere deep. That we're all tired, that we've all lost something, and that maybe, just maybe, we're still hungry for connection. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The warmth of the food between them, the shared effort, the quiet laughter around them, it all said what words could not. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt content. Not accomplished, not in control, not even proud, just oh. And beside him, Sandra looked at peace. Not because life had gotten easier, but because for one moment, it had gotten real. The email came the night before. A note from Miles. And Flavor's corporate's office announcing a closed-door tasting for potential investors. Each division head was to present one dish that captured their brand's soul. Ethan hadn't planned to participate. That was never his role. But when he thought of the soup, her soup, something shifted. He remembered the hush in the dining room when people first tasted it. The way Sandra had quietly ladled it into bowls as if she were mending something invisible. It wasn't just food. It was truth. So he submitted it. He told himself it was temporary, that he'd give her credit, that it was just to gauge reaction, that she deserved the exposure, that maybe she wouldn't mind. The tasting was held in a sleek private kitchen downtown, stainless steel counters, sterile lighting. Ethan wore a blazer, abandoning anonymity for the sake of cameras and investors. When the soup was served, gently poured into bone-white bowls and topped with a single sprig of thyme, the room went still. Then came the murmurs of approval, the soft clinking of spoons, the knowing nods. Brilliantly nostalgic, one investor said, like something your grandmother would make, but refined, another added. Ethan smiled, nodded, shook hands. But under the surface, something twisted. Not guilt exactly, just the tug of a line crossed. He told himself he'd speak to her that night, but he never got the chance. Sandra was wiping down a table when she saw the headline. Miles and Flavors unveils game-changing soup, a recipe from the CEO himself. A photo accompanied it. Her soup, the garnish, the bowl, the way the scallions curled slightly from the steam. Every detail was hers. She felt the air go out of her lungs. There was no mention of her, no credit, not even a footnote. She didn't say a word. She just walked to the back, past the kitchen, past the staff, straight to the manager's office. Ethan looked up from his phone when she entered. Their eyes met. "Did you use my recipe?" she asked calmly, though her hands were clenched. He stood. "Sandra, a yes or no?" He hesitated. "That was enough." "I see," she said, voice dropping. "Sandra, please." She raised a hand. "You don't understand," she said, her voice cracking. "The last time I trusted someone with something I created, I lost everything. My restaurant, my name, my place in the world. This wasn't like that," he said. "I wasn't trying to steal. I wanted to honor it. I wanted people to know what you're capable of." "Then why didn't you tell them who made it?" she snapped. Ethan opened his mouth, but said nothing. "I trusted you," she said, eyes brimming. "I let you in, Sandra." But she was already walking out through the kitchen, past the stairs, every step steady, but her shoulders rigid. She didn't cry until she reached the locker room. There she peeled off her apron, folded it neatly, and placed her name tag on top. She pulled a small slip of paper from her bag and wrote a single line. "Come time, losing my restaurant was enough," she set it on the counter. Then she walked out through the alley door the same way she'd entered so many nights before. But this time she didn't look back. And Ethan, for the first time in years, he didn't feel ambition or fear or even love. He felt regret, raw, unmistakable, and he knew with absolute certainty that this time he had truly crossed the line. Ethan searched everywhere. He called her phone. It rang twice, then went silent. He checked the locker room, the alley, even crossed through the rain to the diner she sometimes stopped at after shift. Nothing. Panic settled deep in his chest. Not the kind from boardrooms or headlines. This was personal. He drove to the rundown building where she used to stay, the one with a flickering porch light and sagging steps. The landlady wearing a faded floral robe opened the door a crack. "Sandra Carter," he asked. "She moved out yesterday," the woman said with a shrug. "Didn't say where, no number. Did she leave anything?" The woman thought a moment, then stepped back and returned with something folded. A towel. "Found it while cleaning." Ethan took it. A soft, worn kitchen towel delicately embroidered at the corner. He stood there holding it like it weighed 100 pounds. Later, sitting in his car, he clutched the towel, unsure why it hit so hard, only that it did. That night, he opened a drawer he hadn't touched in years, the one where he kept tools from another life. Inside was a wooden box. Oak-handled knives never used, still pristine, a gift he had never been ready to give. He cleaned each blade, then laid the towel gently over them. And then he wrote, not a text, not an email, a letter in pen, on paper. "Sandra, I did not know where the recipe came from. Not at first. I only knew that when I tasted it, something opened in me that had been closed for a long time. It reminded me who I used to be before the titles, before the noise. You made me remember. And I betrayed that, not because I doubted you, but because I didn't know how to hold something real without hiding it. You didn't just cook that soup. You told a story with it. You stitched memory, love, and grief into every spoonful. I served it without understanding its weight. I'm sorry, not just for what I did, but for not telling you that night what you deserve to hear. You are not just someone who cooks. You are someone who heals. You take broken things, hearts, hands, people, and help. Make them whole again. Whoever killed your friend, I don't know where you are, but wherever you go, please take this. Knife set. I kept it waiting for someone who would deserve it. Now I know who that is. And if you ever decide to cook, again, truly cook, I hope you'll use them. Because the world needs what you create. And so do I, Ethan. He packed the letter with the knives and towel, tied the box carefully with twine, and sent it without knowing if she would ever see it. 2 days later, in a quiet town outside the city, Sandra sat in the back room of a bakery, rolling dough with practiced hands. A friend had offered her the space for temporary work. The package came mid-morning. She opened it slowly, her fingers trembling at the scent of oak, wood, and steel. The towel lay on top, clean, carefully folded. Then the letter. She read it once, then again. Halfway through the third time, her hands began to shake. Tears spilled, silent and fierce. Not because of what he said, but because of what he saw. I heard not just her skills, not her pain, but her, whole and unhidden. She ran her fingers over the knife handles, and for the first time in months, the emptiness in her chest cracked open, and something stirred. Not just the need to cook, but the will to create again. She tied her hair back, wiped her eyes, and whispered into the stillness. All right then, let's try again. The invitation had come through a mutual friend, a small charity event, just outside the city, raising funds for families who had lost homes to recent floods. They needed a guest chef to prepare the evening's main course, someone who could bring comfort and simplicity to the plate. Sandra almost said no. She had only just returned to the kitchen, cooking in small bursts at a part-time bakery job. She wasn't sure she was ready. Not for something public. Not for something that would ask her to give herself through food. Again, her friend urged her gently. You won't have to speak. Just cook. So she agreed. The night of the event, Sandra arrived early, dressed in black, hair pinned in a soft bun, a crate of fresh herbs in one arm, and her oak-handled knives in the other. She stepped into the venue, an open-air hall with warm lights and linen-covered tables. Volunteers bustled. Musicians tuned quietly. But what stopped her was the booth at the center. A hand-painted sign read, Sandra's table. The taste of starting over. Her breath caught. She froze. Then she saw him. Ethan, not disguised. Not Eric the dish guy, just himself. Tall, steady, vulnerable. He walked toward her slowly, unsure if she'd stay or leave. She didn't move. When he reached her, his voice was soft. I told them your name belonged up there. She searched his eyes for arrogance or guilt. She found only him. What is this? She asked. It's your story, he said, and I want the world to hear it, the way it was meant to be told. People had started gathering, guests, donors, volunteers. Someone handed Ethan a microphone. He hesitated, then faced the crowd. I don't usually speak at these things, he began. And I didn't plan to tonight, but I have something important to say. He glanced at Sandra. There was a time I believed food was just business, numbers, trends, staying ahead. I forgot what it meant to serve something with soul. He paused. Then I met someone who reminded me that food isn't about perfection. It's about people, about memory, about resilience. He turned to her. This woman, Sandra Carter, taught me that real cooking isn't about ego. It's about love. And tonight, the best thing I've ever tasted isn't on the menu. It's the chance to tell her something. A hush fell. I love her. Sandra's hand rose to her mouth. I love her because she didn't give up when the world tried to take everything. Because she fed others when she had nothing left. And because before she believed in herself again, She believed. In me. Applause broke out. Eyes glistened. Sandra stepped forward, heart pounding, and took the microphone. I used to think love was something you had to earn, she said, voice trembling. Something that could be taken when you weren't enough. But this man, he saw me at my lowest and stayed. She turned to him, tears shining. I love you, too, Ethan, because you gave me back the one thing I thought I'd lost myself. They embraced as applause echoed around them. But in that moment, all that existed was the quiet warmth of two people finding home in each other. Months later, Sandra's table became a cozy neighborhood gem. No giant sign, no buzz, just a handwritten menu and a full waiting list. Each dish told a story, some printed on cards, others whispered between glasses of wine and shared laughter. Sandra ran the kitchen with heart, sleeves rolled up, soft smile, steady hands. She still gave leftovers to the man who swept the alley. And Ethan, he was there every night, not behind a desk, but behind the scenes, washing lettuce, pouring water, stealing glances at the woman who changed everything. One night, as they sat on the back steps after closing, Sandra nudged him. If tomorrow was your last day, she teased, what would you eat? Ethan leaned his head back and smiled at the stars. Anything, he said. As long as you cook it. She laughed, rested her head on his shoulder, and whispered, deal. Sometimes love doesn't arrive like a lightning bolt. It shows up quietly in a bowl of soup, in a midnight meal, in a man learning to feel again, and a woman daring to believe that her heart still has something to give. Sandra didn't just find her way back to the kitchen. She found her way back to herself. And in doing so, she lit a fire that warmed more than just food. It healed two souls and everyone they touched. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you remember or forgive or hope again, then we invite you to become part of our growing family. Subscribe to soul-stirring stories where every story is crafted to heal, to inspire, and to remind us that the most ordinary moments can lead to the most extraordinary love. Until next time, stay warm, stay open, and never stop believing in second chances.